Hey, good evening, everyone. I really got to say that intro when you hear it in your headphones, that's banging. That is banging, JC. I like it. I like it a lot. Welcome to episode 17 of the Game Changers. 17, Carla. 17. That's a pretty big number. I'm pretty proud of that. How about you?
Amazing.
I
Am
know, yeah. And the fantasy football regular season's over. We're into other stuff right now, but the sports affiliation has so much more to offer everyone. So make sure if you haven't subscribed to the channel and following them on Twitter, make sure you go do that. Give us a thumbs up. We definitely want to keep coming on here. And if no one's watching, what are they going to keep us around for? So you guys got to keep coming. I really appreciate it. We're so lucky to have everyone at Sports Affiliation. But I do have to make an announcement. Our scheduled guest, John Ryan, he's battling the elements of the weather out east there, and he was unable to make it tonight. We want him to be safe with his family, so we're going to reschedule that. And luckily, we had a backup guest. So, Carla, would you do the honors, please?
Of course. Doug Orth, what can I say about him? He's the creator of Preseason matchup analysis and big boards, writer at FF Today, no losing money season in 24 years of high stakes fantasy football, former Kings Classic champ, basketball official, psychology major, and more. How are you tonight, Doug?
Let me read
With
into
that
what you
case,
just said. I don't know. I'm the backup guest, and I'm not. No. So I was thinking of. I haven't always wanted to say this, but one of the things I was thinking of: second time guest, long time watcher. So there you go.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. Thank you for being here. You're always our number one. We don't have anyone else, but you're our number one backup guest, okay? So we love you. Thank you. The
thank you
last
for
time when you were on the show the first time, I missed out because I was on vacation.
And that's why I went. And
I
that's why I
hopped
was
on for a little bit and I was able to see a little bit, and but I just felt like, oh well, this is a perfect opportunity. So I'm so happy that I finally get to be here when you are our guest.
Amen to that. Amen to that.
All this fantasy sports stuff, that's all cool and everything, but what the people really want to know, Doug, and what I want to know, and hopefully I didn't miss this in the first episode, how did you and Carla meet?
Great question. I don't know. We established the year we first met, but we met as a result of going to the YMCA together, or not together, but meeting at the Y. And so, typically, what would happen is I would be coming out of the wellness center, and she would be at the front desk, and we would have we would banter, I guess you could say banter, every so often, and. That was always friendly conversation. I would look forward to it when it happened. It didn't happen all that often, but it probably started maybe 5 years ago, I think is what we agreed on. And then let's see, it was about summer of 21 that we started running into each other in the parking lot. Susan, actually, one of the people that have spoken in the chat already. Carla and Susan would be in the parking lot usually talking, and then I would come out from the Y and interject some wisecrack, something about my favorite girl out here, or favorite woman out here, and then I would leave, and then Carla would say, if you're my favorite girl, why do you keep leaving? And so on and so forth. And anyway, so she invited me to a Zumba event. As everybody that watches the show regularly knows, that she's a Zumba instructor, and so she had a Zumba event at her place. I think it was late July of 21. After almost getting lost and having a hard time finding the place, I ended up finding the place. We ended up talking for. Well, okay. I don't want to forget this too. I showed up around 4:00, so the event was. I think the Zumba part was at 10 a.m. The lunch was at 1, but there was no really specific time offered. Anyway, so I came in around 4. Pretty much everybody was gone at that point. we ended up talking for at least 2 or 3 hours that night, and then we did the same thing. I actually came earlier for the second event, and had another nice long talk, and that's basically how that part of it started. So.
It all sounds a little fishy. I think that you kind of planned it. I'm going to go late, so I'll have this opportunity to chat with my favorite person. So I'm glad that all worked out.
Yeah, I have a devious mind. Definitely. No, I wish I could say it was all planned. It was more just, when you able to, you have a connection with somebody, and then it bears out with 2 long, very nice conversations where you don't lay it all out. I mean, you have just a very free-flowing conversation. Like, okay, well, I already like this person, and well, now you can tell that we have a rapport, that it's conversation's easy, and yeah, so.
So, I mean, if you met at this gym, you must live in a close proximity to each other.
Yes. Yeah.
Very nice.
No more than 10 minutes away before the move or after the move. Yeah. So about 10 minutes away.
It's freaking awesome. It was meant to be, you guys.
It was. I mean, it was really meant to be. To say that when we first met, we start talking. He was a basketball official. I was a swimming official. So we would talk. I was married and he was not, but he knew that I was married. So our talks will be about, just like being an official or saying hi or saying whatever. But we both, like, after we spoke before, like after my divorce and everything, and we spoke about some stuff, like he said, what if? And I said, what if? And after that, like, we found each other after COVID and everything. So it was, if something is meant to be, it's meant to be, honestly.
Now, Doug, do you have kids? I know Carla has kids. Do you have kids?
No kids.
Okay. So, Carla, how I was just going to say, Carla, how do your kids like Doug? Tell the truth. He's not listening. No one's here.
Well, the first day, honestly, the first day that they saw him, Joe Michael and Cassia came to me and they told me, Mom, you know that guy likes you. I'm like, no, he doesn't. So they were the one that like opened my eyes. They were like, yeah, like, you're stupid. You know that, right? he really likes you. So it was kind of like my kids who opened my eye to see that he really likes me at some point. Like, I didn't want to have someone in my life, and Susan knows that I told her that I don't want to have anyone in my life, honestly. And if he wasn't the person that he was, I wouldn't even like open my life and my heart to him.
Well, that is like such a great story, and I know that I saw you guys when we were in Canton. I know I actually talked to Doug briefly. Didn't get to talk to Carla, but boy, oh boy, you guys are in big trouble next year because you're going to have me just with like the whole time. So
I can't wait to hug you.
like, I need to know like where you're staying so I can have the room next to yours. It could be an adjoining one.
Definitely.
Doug's over there going, okay, wait a minute. I didn't sign up for that.
The game changers live from the expo. Gotcha. I like
that. Would be a big game changer too for a lot of people.
I knew better. I knew she liked him.
So, in all seriousness, Doug, you're, a very well-respected person in this fantasy football community. And I was reading some of your bio, and I'm not aware, so I wanted to know this creator of preseason matchup analysis. Can you explain that to me a little bit more?
Yeah. Well, you wanted me to talk, so now you're good.
Yes, please. I want to know. I'm here to learn about you.
So, yeah. My process usually begins in late May, early June, and so what it builds up I call the whole thing preseason matchup analysis. What it ends up building to is what I call a big board. And on my big board, you'll see 4 different colors of, you'll see like a player name, their team designation, position, so on and so forth. And then you'll see 17 blocks, of course, for the 17 weeks of the season, 17 blocks. And it's basically a matchup analysis. So what am I saying? A green highlight for a player in a specific week is a strong lean toward the player. A white one, or basically no color, is a slight lean toward the player. A yellow box is a slight lean toward the defense, and a red box is a major lean toward the defense. It occurred to me the year or two before I came up with this, or decided to use this as my basis for ranking players and doing analysis, was I didn't want my players to go against the Steelers or the Ravens defense, because back in the early 2000s, it was year after year the Ravens and the Steelers were continually the best defenses. And it made sense to me. Well, why am I making my job harder by drafting players that potentially have Pittsburgh and Baltimore on the schedule during the most important part of the season? And if you think about it, I think back then it was still the AFC North. Well, that'd be Cincinnati and Cleveland. Cincinnati and Cleveland are playing those teams back then in 16 games. So a quarter of the games every year Cincinnati and Cleveland are playing are against the 2 best defenses in the league, or 2 of the top 5 defenses in the league. Obviously, it has evolved since then, where I'm considering cornerback and receiver matchups. I'm considering the strength of individual defensive players, maybe like how good a defensive lineman is at run defense, and then taking that individual information from the 6 or 7 players from the front 7, and then projecting how good that defense is going to be at stopping the run over the course of the year. And again, I do this in the summer, so this isn't something that I take 3 weeks of information and then make my decision. This is a draft pool. So that's in a very much a nutshell what that is. I could go much deeper into it. I could tell you that each team generally has a primary. I'll just give you this example. So each team tends to have a primary slot player, slot receiver, for example, right? So now, no receiver is going to stay in their one position 100% of the time. Usually what you get is something like a mix of 40, 40, 20, something along those lines. So they'll play 40% on the left side, 20% on the right side, and 40% in the slot, or some variation of it, right? So they move around. The defensive players, not so much. So I'm taking all of this into account. I'm taking into account who the primary slot defender is for that. If I'm focusing on the slot receiver for my projection, then I'm focusing on who that primary slot defender is going to be. It's a very detailed process. If it doesn't sound like a detailed process, it's a very detailed process.
How could it not sound like a detailed process? Oh my God, you do this like all the time?
This is how I spend about half of my summer. There's about 6 weeks. 6 weeks I usually take in analyzing this stuff. Yeah.
So would you say that this is more what this is more for is like DFS stuff as opposed to redraft and things like that? Because you're kind of looking at the matchups each week, so that would be more like DFS.
Yeah, I know of some people that have had a great deal of success using my preseason matchup, my DMAs for DFS purposes. I was a little slow or a little late coming to the DFS game, and I don't, with the amount of teams that I have, amount of redraft and dynasty teams that I have, I don't have a lot of time to do the projections in order to set DFS lineups every week. I also feel like the DFS is more luck than I want to deal with on a regular basis. I'll play DFS during the playoffs, but I like to do my own projections before I do DFS lineups, and that's, again, you're going to need time for 32 teams to do that. And I don't have that kind of time during the season. Now, when it gets to be the playoffs and you have 12 teams last week, 8 teams this week, 4 teams next week, I'm going to have time to do those for a single game. And then, so I prefer the smaller slates. I prefer single entry, that type of thing. But yeah, there is use for DFS here. But the problem with doing it now, I can't use it now because the season's already over. These are projections I'm doing in July and August. They're not going to be very applicable now. No. But the hope is at some point that I can do this full time for one employer, that I can make this a weekly thing, and then there is potential for this to take off. I know there is. It just needs the platform.
Hey, you never know who's watching this show, Doug. This might have just been your big break, okay? You just never know. And I want a little bit of credit, okay, babe?
You got a babe too. You got a babe number 2.
Well, Coach Greg was saying he was doing that, like he started doing that 3 years ago. Do you have any info you can give Coach Greg about it? Or because you've been doing that for, I think, more than 24 years or something like that, right?
Close to 20 years. And just follow me. Don't do the work yourself, Coach Greg. Just let me do it for you.
Well, he already said you're going to be his new best friend.
Damn right. And that's the thing. And Carla knows that I gripe to her about this every so often. This is, I think, if there was more of a platform, if I had a bigger platform than I do right now, I think this is something that would really catch on like wildfire. I really do. Because I think, especially early in the season, and here's some of my rationale for this. All spring and summer, people do best balls, people draft, and they'll say, "Oh, I got to have this player, got to have this player." And then what do they do the week leading up to the season? Oh, who's my guy playing? You go straight to the matchups, right? And you do that basically every week for the season. You look at the matchups, barring the Christian McCaffreys, barring the Tyreek Hills, you're playing those guys regardless. That's not what matchup analysis was done for. It was done for the non-elite players, because the non-elite players, everybody should have at least one elite player. It's when you're able to find non-elite players that play at an elite level, that's what separates you from the crowd.
That's awesome.
That is a lot going on there.
We can be your platform, Doug. JC.
Look at that. Look at that. The game changers, bringing people together, Carla. We're bringing them together.
I agree 100%. I agree with that. So, Doug, I know that you bought me this shirt and KC won this week. So what's your prediction?
11. Is KC playing this week? Yeah, this one's tough. So I did a pod with a good friend of the show, good friend of mine, Jim Coventry, this morning, and this is one we struggled with. The reason being is Buffalo is down 3 linebackers and at least 3 defensive backs. When I say down, they all either got injured last week or came into the game injured. And Buffalo took a lot of hits on in terms of injuries this past week. If I knew half of those guys were going to play, the game being in Buffalo, I would take the Bills, and I would take them. I wouldn't have much issue taking them. But that's the beauty, and that's the beauty of what we do, and it's the insanity that drives us insane too. There was a good part of the Bills game where they were using AJ Klein, and I'm sure AJ Klein doesn't mean anything to either one of you guys, but he's a bit of a journeyman. He's been in the league a while, but there's a reason he's basically Buffalo's fourth linebacker. And one of the areas that manifests itself in is Travis Kelce. Usually, linebackers and safeties usually guard the tight ends. More so the safeties, but sometimes the linebackers. If you're on linebacker number 4 or inside linebacker number 4, and you're trying to guard a guy that's going to go to the Hall of Fame, regardless of whether he's 34 or 27, just age, that's an issue. That this could be a huge Travis Kelce game, and if it's a huge Travis Kelce game, that probably means good things for the Chiefs offense. So as of Tuesday night right now, I'm stuck as far as how I'm going to project the game and who I think is going to win. I would lean toward the Bills like I said, if I know that some of their injured defenders are going to be back, but we don't know that right now. We will know more of that on Thursday and Friday. So, assuming those guys are all out, I can see Kansas City winning close in an ugly game.
So are you a Kansas City fan as well, or you just bought her the shirt?
Yeah, just bought her the shirt. I'm from the Midwest. I grew up born and raised in Nebraska. I did go to college down in Kansas for I was there for about 7 years. Moved up back to Nebraska, and then came out here for ESPN back in 2006. But so I did spend some time in or around Kansas City, and that's pretty much what's on TV when it's NFL Sundays. That's what's on is the Broncos and the Chiefs. So as you can imagine. But what's funny is for the majority of my life, the Chiefs have been a very bad team. So it's funny since I've been out here and Andy Reid. It's basically since Andy Reid took over that they've been a perennial contender, a perennial AFC West champion. So, I've always kind of had a soft spot in my heart for them because they were a bit of a lovable losers type of thing for the 80s and the 90s. They had some good teams, but again, for the most part, they were usually 8-8 or worse. So, anyway, they're not my first team. I don't have a favorite team anymore. Thankfully, it makes
you guys can't. The people that do the work that you do cannot possibly have a favorite team. You just can't do it.
I realized that about 4 or 5 years ago. I was rooting for the Texans. My last favorite team was the Texans, and then when they pulled the
okay, well, see, that's good information. We got that.
But when they traded DeAndre Hopkins, that was kind of the realization. Like, okay, if I really want to do this, first of all, I thought it was a terrible trade to begin with, and that I was already kind of, I'm not sure I want to be rooting for one team anymore because I think it's affecting how I do my fantasy performance. And then when that trade happened, that was the push I needed to just say, you know what, every team's my favorite team, and it allows me to look at all of them on board, even playing the field. So.
Well, for the record, I'm not a professional. Even I thought that was a terrible trade. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and what's funny, so one of my jobs is I do news aggregation for USA Today. So occasionally I'm doing fantasy analysis or fantasy tips for the USA Today does some of their stuff goes to the Huddle and some other platforms. And I remember writing on my fantasy tip, I said, this is like a fantasy football trade. Because back in 2018, 2019, that wasn't a bad trade in fantasy. David Johnson for DeAndre Hopkins. That wasn't a bad trade back then. For fantasy. But in reality, David Johnson was a 29-year-old, I think he was 29-year-old running back who's obviously now out of the league. Running backs don't have that kind of shelf life. So it was a very short-sighted trade that was meant to, I guess, help Houston that year and the next, which it didn't end up doing. And it was done more because DeAndre Hopkins, I guess, him and Bill O'Brien, who was the head coach at the time, I guess they didn't see eye to eye. And so he got shipped out. Anyway, that was the kind of push I needed in order to say all 32 teams are my favorite team. And that's not a cop-out answer. That's just the way it just makes my heart job much easier.
Yeah, it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
I'll accept that answer. Thank you.
I don't accept that answer. It should be KC.
Go Broncos. Go Raiders. Go Chargers.
It should be
go
KC.
Everyone but KC.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially after Mahomes got his helmet broken. Poor guy. He's my boy. Come on.
That was crazy. I don't think I've ever seen that.
Oh, it was awful.
Has that ever happened?
Crazy. No. They shouldn't be playing with that weather. It was really awful.
Yeah, they did chalk it up to the extreme cold causing that to happen. And
Yeah.
I saw a note on the X today that the manufacturer of the helmet came out. I guess they felt that like they had to defend their helmet, and so they wrote like 2 paragraphs talking about So I didn't realize there was any kind of a blowback on that, but apparently there was.
Oh, I'm sure there was. Come on, just I could imagine they legalities of that. I'm sure they had to make some kind of announcement. But yeah, so I know we're going to talk about the expo just a little bit because how can you not? I mean, that's how that's how all of us have connected, and again, I can't wait till August. But you're in this King's Classic. So you got to be a pretty important guy, okay, to be in this King's Classic, from what I hear. That's
or
the
have a lot of money and a lot of influence.
Well, do you have a lot of money and a lot of influence? I don't know. I'm trying to find out about you.
In my mind, I do, but go ahead. Just go ahead.
So how did you get invited to that? Like, do they just show up at your house with the jacket and stuff and say, "Hey, Doug, would you like to play the King's Classic?"
Yeah. Thankfully, Bob Long did make the trip down to Connecticut, and he said, "I want you, Doug Orth, to join me in the fantasy football fight
because you're an all-around good guy. It even says it on your name down there."
Yeah, so I was stunned to get the email. I'd competed against Bob in what's called the Huddle Auction League. I've been in that since 2008, 2009, somewhere in there. I might as well brag about my success in that league. And
yes,
I'm going to, because I think that was Bob's. I don't know how long Bob's been in that league. I'm going to say maybe 10 years. But if I've been in that league, let's say 15 years, I have made the playoffs 13 times, made the championship game, I think 7 times, and won it 4 times. I think I've lost count. I'd have to go back to my option.
That's where you got all your money from, isn't it?
No, it's an experts league. I wish. I wouldn't have very many friends in the industry, or I wouldn't have very many friends in that league if that was a league. But I have to go to the leagues where people don't know who I am to compete, because. But I think that's part of what, at least that's why I tell myself. I asked Bob, and I asked Bob this summer, and I didn't quite get an answer from him on that. But because I remember him saying, "I'm glad that I'm going to be able to finally compete against you in the league." I said, "Bob, you've been competing in the same league for 10 years." So maybe what I thought was maybe what I thought wasn't what happened. But no, it was an email back in 2018, and I'm glad I took the dive, because at that time things were still more tight financially, and trying to just going up to Ohio, a place I'd never been, going up with a bunch of strangers. There was no expo quite in 2018 yet. In 2019, it was just beginning the expo, but people weren't going to get in Ohio for the expo. I think there was like 70 people at that first expo, if I remember right. So we were definitely going up for the King's Classic back then. But yeah, like I said, just an email, and then just deciding, okay, do I really want to put the money down? I think it was $100 entry fee, and there was some. At that point, we were still doing it for. I think that's actually the only year we did it for a prize. Since then, we've been basically doing it for charity and whatnot, and the belt. And so that first year, I think that first year, I think it was $300 to the winner, $100 to the second place, and then like I said, we've been doing it for charity and the belt, and on the belt since then.
So how'd you do this year?
Yeah.
Not so well.
No. What's funny is, and Carla knows this, that this was the best year I've had in terms of my money leagues and whatnot. I basically doubled my entry fees this year.
Yeah.
So I had and all it was the approach I took. I took basically a different approach than I've been very stout and very staunch. I need running backs. I need good running backs at the top of the draft, and then I'll figure it out after that. And so I've been probably stubborn in that regard. Anyway, changed my line of thinking a little bit this year. Focus a lot more on receivers and then taking my chances at running back. And for the most part, it worked well. But anyway, to answer your question, I stunk up the joint in both of those in both the Canton leagues because I had Nick Chubb in both of my leagues.
Oh well, I mean, come on, what are you gonna do?
Yep. So that helped hurt me in both of them, obviously. I was actually very close. I missed playoffs both. I was very close to the 1 seed in the Snake League, even though I didn't make the playoffs. I really just needed David Montgomery not to miss some games. If he hadn't missed some games, there was a very good chance I would have been a top seed. I don't know if I would have been the number 1 seed, but I would.
Which division are you in?
Well, there's two. There's the Blanda. There's Jim Brown. The Brown is the where all the Sirius XM personalities and whatnot, like Dave Richard, Jim Coventry, and who else? Jeff Manns. Those the guys that you hear on Sirius XM quite often. They're in the Jim Brown, and then I'm in the league with guys like Drew Davenport and Matt Donnelly and those guys. So.
Those are all pretty. I know all those names. How cool is that? That's awesome.
Yeah.
But you know who else I know? I know Doug Orth.
Yeah.
Of course.
You're pretty important.
Yeah. Just a little man on the totem pole. I don't know what you're talking about.
Doug, if you had to choose a completely different career path, what would you choose and why?
Yeah, I know one thing. You mentioned the psychology degree. I know that's something I've dabbled with back and forth, or I've bounced around back and forth. And so I could definitely see myself as a psychologist. I don't know that I would be a psychiatrist. Wow, geez. I don't think I could do the drug prescribing and stuff, but I think having somebody sit on the couch and tell me their problems, I could probably roll with that. I know you and I have discussed like coaching. I don't see coaching in my future anymore, but I know people, because as we discussed, I'm a basketball official, and when I see something that stands out to me as an official, I'll sometimes go up to a player, especially in those what we call non-board games. If I can help a player along their path, their development path, even if it's a technique thing, or hey, this is what we look for. Just keep your hands off, or maybe you want to approach this in a different way. If I can give my knowledge of basketball back to a kid who's 7th, 8th grade, 4th, 5th, or high school or whatever, I think the one thing I keep saying is I rep the game like I would have wanted refs to be with me when I was 10. So many questions that I have that I couldn't. But okay, I guess they're just calling dumb calls, right? Because that's what we think of officials, like they don't know any better, but they typically do. It's just I don't know, for whatever reason they're not. I don't know if they're told not to do it. We're not told to do it or not to do it, and just it makes sense to me. It makes our job easier if we talk to them and tell them what we're looking for, and then if they adjust, great. If they don't, well then that's on them. So, but anyway, to answer your question, psychologist and basketball coach would be two of the things that jump in mind.
I mean, I go with you to mostly like your basketball games, and I see how you like come over and talk to the kids, and they look highly up to you, and they appreciate that, and that's something that you don't see it every single day. And I love it.
And I think the beauty of it is at least one of the gigs. They've got multiple gigs, the repping gigs, and believe me, Wendi, you wouldn't believe how many just AAU and travel games there are to officiate around here. I don't know if that's Connecticut or if that's the country in general. I can't imagine it's the country in general, but I'll tell you this story real quick. So Carla had a graduation back in that was last year, wasn't it?
December, when I got into the accident. Yeah. 1 month after.
Yeah, so about 14 months ago.
Yes, kind of.
Yeah, 13, 14 months ago. And wouldn't you know, it was right around December 10th, I think is when it was, that weekend. So wouldn't you know, Wendi, every possible non-board and board person was asking me if I could work that day. I have never had that. I had 5 different requests to work on basically that Saturday that Carla was graduating. It just blew my mind. Like, I've never had to tell this many people no for a job. Anyway, but yeah, there's no shortage. There's usually no shortage of opportunities to go rep somewhere and do 3 or 4 games, make $150 on a Saturday for working 4 or 5 hours. It's just really,
like, how old are the kids? Like, what is the age range?
It ranges. I think the lowest or the youngest I rep is probably like in the 4th grade, and then it goes all the way up to when I do high school games, so all the way up to senior. So
the 4th graders, though, you probably have to be a little patient with them, don't you?
Yeah, thankfully I don't do a lot of those games, but yeah,
they're so cute though.
What's also funny too, you don't really find out until you get there what you're going to get.
That's they do that for a reason.
Yeah.
Because if you knew that you were going to have to do a 4th grade one, you're like, oh no, I'm sick, I can't come.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I'm out. No, it's you do find some skilled players there, and you kind of put your plant your hat on that. It's like, okay, you can see the talent, and there are some cute things that they do. And reffing 4th graders is not that hard because you'll usually let them do, if they take an extra step, well, guess what? Everybody else is taking an extra step too. So
yeah, because you wouldn't be playing any basketball if you had to call every foul, right?
Yeah.
That's so awesome. You know what though? I guarantee you that those kids from the 4th grade up, when you are reffing their game, I'll bet you they're all like, "Oh, we got the cool ref today." I guarantee it.
Well, that's what I was going to say too. Was I know a couple of the gigs that this ties into what we were just saying, that the reason they keep asking me back is because I explain my calls, because they know the kids can approach me, the coaches can approach me. They know
that's how they learn. Yeah, that's how they learn too.
Yeah.
So you're kind of coaching when you're reffing, honestly. So
and it's funny too, because I have multiple officials say, "Man, why aren't you coaching? You're just going up to the players and telling them not what to do." But
Susan said she sees you as a coach. How many more people need to tell you? Sorry, Doug, I don't make the rules.
He played basketball, so he should coach it.
Yeah, it's a multi-layered story. Why I don't think I would be a good
Hi,
coach.
Gemma.
I think I would be a good coach. I don't think I want to coach. I think
yeah, you have to want to do it. That's for sure. You can tell when a coach doesn't want to be there. So yeah.
What initially kept me out, I'll keep this short. What initially kept me out of it was I was under the belief, and so basically Carla told me that it wasn't the case that you needed a teaching certificate in order to be a coach. And apparently that's not the case. I don't know if that changed pre-COVID, post-COVID, or what. But I'd always known it to be you need to be a teacher in order to be a coach of a sport, like a high school sport or whatever. So that was part of the reason why I didn't do any coaching.
That may have changed.
You need to tell.
What do
Go
I
ahead.
Because I think, I mean, in my state, but I mean, I know I'm in a different state, but these schools need coaches so badly that I think they've kind of opened it up. I'm sure you got to do background checks and all that, which is fine. You're not like a hardened serial killer, right? I need to know.
Well, I wouldn't admit if I was.
You'd be a terrible one if that were the case.
Oh.
You need to tell her about the T-shirt story. This is a good story for Wendi.
Actually, Wendy, this is why I've never lost any money in 24 seasons of playing high stakes, because I steal money. So it's hard to lose when you're always just getting it. No, I'm so teasing. What's the shirt story?
The T-shirt story.
Which one?
The basketball T-shirt story.
Oh God, yes. Okay. So I mentioned this. I've mentioned this before, just so our viewers or our listeners understand here. Board games are what basically are assigned through the high school system. So, what are two local high schools for you, Wendy?
Local high schools?
Yeah.
Hebron and Portage.
Okay. So if it's that would be an example of a board game. So the majority of what I do on weekends are non-board games, and majority of what I do in the spring and summer are non-board games, because that's not during the basketball season. Now you can do non-board games during the basketball season too, but the gist of what I'm saying is if they're school sanctioned, then they're board games. If they're not, then they're AAU or travel. Anyway, so Carla and I are at a non-board game, and she's in the stands, and there's a substitute. I call a foul, and there's also a substitution thing going on. And if you know anything about these non-board games, and they'll usually have 3 or 4 games in a single area, so it's loud, a whole bunch of stuff. There's not the courts are cramped, so the people are on top of you, all that stuff. Anyway, so I call a foul, and I guess I think I'm trying to either do signal across the court to the scorekeeper, tell him or her, whatever, whoever the foul is on or whatever, and somebody's trying to get in, and I guess I'm trying to do 2 things at once. Anyway, somebody is sitting next, a parent is sitting next to Carla, and I think multiple people are sitting next to Carla, and they're saying, "What's that guy doing? He just this, that, the other." And so, "Oh, he's just a basketball official. He's just making up his own rules." Okay. So of course Carla hears this. I don't, and so she tells me on our drive back. I think it's on our drive back. She tells me what this parent said. And lo and behold, about a week later, she gets me a shirt. It's a black shirt. Nothing on the front and on the back. I'm a basketball official. I make up my own rules. So yeah, that's. I don't wear that shirt as much as I should, because first of all, I'm not going to wear that to a board game, because I value my job.
Yeah, they kind of take the rules seriously there too.
But I try, when I think about it, I have it set out so I'll wear it more often so I don't forget it, because I think it's actually kind of funny, and given the right crowd, I'll wear it more often. But anyway, it's something I can keep looking back at and laugh about.
So Doug, you're right. You write a lot. That's what you are. You're a writer. Okay. So how did you decide just one day, hey, I'm going to start writing about fantasy football?
Well, I started this hobby, basically about 24 years ago. So I knew pretty quickly after that first year. I signed up for 4 teams the first year, won 2 of the leagues, and I'm like, okay, I think I found something. I started writing a little bit after that, but this was a process too. I didn't think of myself as a good writer until after I took a job here in Connecticut, a place called Sports Ticker, that really kind of helped me get my thanks, Gemma. That really kind of made me aware of some of the things that you learn back in high school that you tend to forget, in terms of not subject verb agreement, but just, for example, you take Indiana Pacers, comma who. This is the example. I give. Associating the right words with like direct objects and pronouns and whatnot, figuring out which one to use when you're writing your copy. That understanding that part of the English language or relearning it was important to my development to producing clean copy. But to how did I get to the point? It's actually very non-eventful how I decided I was right. So, like, I'm telling you that because it establishes the background. Okay, that I'm thinking that writing is a possibility. But around 2010, 2011. Now, mind you, I've already been writing for FF Today for 5 or 6 years at this point. But at around 2010, 2011, I'm also writing to help myself make a living, or help make a living for myself. I'm writing previews for another company. I'm writing football, basketball, baseball previews. And all this time, I'm looking for a full-time job, and I'm still not convinced I'm necessarily going to make my living as a writer, but I'm not having any success finding a full-time job. Just put it plain and simple. And I'm doing these previews, and it was just one afternoon. I can't tell you what time of year it was. I'm sitting here doing preview, and I just, I guess I'm a writer now. I didn't have that mentality. I was writing to pay the bills up until 2010, 2011. And it was about that time in, let's say, 2011, where I guess, okay, maybe this is just something I need to, maybe this is my full-time job. And so from then, I think it's become more of that's how I identify myself, more so than whereas before I was just paying the bills.
Amazing. Just to be able to do something, and it's kind of sounds like it was your dream, really. I mean,
yeah, well, that's the funny thing. I don't know. I don't think I've shown Carla this stuff. The first college I was at was a little small college in Kansas called Cloud County Community College. And I wrote for the student magazine. I don't really know how I got that, how I was allowed to do it. And when I need to remind myself from where I've been, I'll go back and pull one of those articles out, and it was terrible. It was terrible. I kid you not. Just I couldn't have been drier. I couldn't have been like some of the subject verb agreement. I don't know how that made the copy. I really don't. I mean, I should thank my editor for allowing me to have a spot in the magazine, but I certainly didn't deserve it. And it was. I didn't feel like I was a good writer. I knew I could write, but I didn't feel like I was a good writer. It probably wasn't until 2010, 2011 where I thought of myself as essentially a good writer. And it's amazing how much your writing changes. It's amazing how much anything changes when you realize you might be good at it. Because you approach it. You think you're an average basketball player until someone maybe tells you that you're better than average. Oh, okay. Then you start thinking, okay, maybe I'm better than average. Then your play reflects it. The amount of work you put into it reflects it. And that all that stuff kind of is a circle of life type of thing, where you believe it, then you put more work into it, which comes back around to then you perform better, and then it just keeps going back and forth. And so, but yeah, this journey all started with me thinking I was a sucky writer. So yeah.
I just can't, I can't imagine. I guess I still wonder why people do this whole content creator. That's the word. You're a content creator. Yeah. That's the terminology. People are calling us content creators, Carla. What? No, I don't feel like we're someone like Doug freaking Orth. He's a content creator.
I agree with that. I totally agree. The time that he put Wendy, I don't know how
I
he
can
does
imagine.
it. Like, he doesn't sleep. I wake up sometimes at 4 o'clock and he's still writing or he's still fixing what he needs to post. Like even the comma, even the point, he wants to know that he wants to make sure that this is right in the right place before he send it. So he makes sure that he is up to that point that he's right before sending everything. I give him kudos for that. I wouldn't do that. He does a really great job. I'm not
And the
kidding
cool
you.
thing is he does it for people like me. Okay, it's like, and I'm not paying you. I don't do a lot of subscriptions to things. I can still count on people like Doug and Doug. If I send Doug a message, you know what? He's going to answer me. And it's just, and I appreciate that. So and that's how we learn, is by listening. And obviously people like me that just are typical fantasy football fans and play in a lot of leagues and stuff, but we're not really that good at it, or at least I'm not. I should speak for myself. But we look at what Doug says and ultimately make our own decision. But I really depend on that stuff. So thank you, Doug.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting ways, and I understand why they call it content creation, because there's so many ways in the fantasy billion-dollar industry like fantasy football. There's so many ways to approach it, and we think of content creation as, okay, this person's going to tell me why I should start this person, sit this person, pick this person off waivers. But there's also what you guys do, which is introduce people. If not even maybe introduce, but help people get to know people in the industry. That's content creation. It's just a different form. There's so many ways. You can provide the numbers, you can provide the film analysis, you can provide what you guys provide. There's umpteen number of things that a person or a couple people that can, like yourselves, can provide. You're providing a service to the industry, whether you recognize it.
Oh, Doug. All right, you convinced me. That's it, Carla.
But
we're content creators.
Yeah,
official. Doug said it. He's really good at convincing you. I would listen to him.
Definitely. That's why I'm like.
Yeah, right. Bag number 2, stop it. Bag number 1 now. But yeah, when I first started back in the late 90s, of course this wasn't an option. This getting on a webcam and saying, okay, I'm gonna talk into the camera for 5 minutes. The internet had just basically started for most of us. Okay, fantasy football was taking off because of the internet, but there certainly wasn't this arena, this platform. What we had back then was people writing articles, and we didn't have advanced stats. That was something that came along probably 10 years after almost a little bit around 10 years after I started. A lot of what I did when I first started preseason matchup analysis, that was done off reputation and just basically watching every game I could get my hands on. But I didn't get to see all the games because things like NFL Plus condensed games didn't exist back then either. So there was so much room for what I do to grow because I didn't have access to all this information back then. Now I do. And I would still complain I don't have access to near enough information, because every site wants you to pay $7.99 a month to get their stuff, and before you know it, you're paying $500 to $1,000 for premium stats. When and Jim and I talked a bit about this on the pod earlier today. Numbers are a key part to the puzzle, key piece to the puzzle. But if you rely explicitly on numbers to have success in this industry, you're probably going to fail more than succeed, because it helps to understand football. It helps to understand the why. And the numbers don't always explain why. The stats can tell you any story that you want to believe. You can create a story based on a stat if you want to. So I hope that gives you some kind of insight. I don't know.
Of course. I just, your story is amazing, and appreciate you. And to sit and talk, like you said, back then, you didn't have what you have now. You didn't have the internet where you could pop on YouTube and just start talking. But to actually talk in front of someone for like 5 whole minutes, that's a lot. I mean, you don't realize it until you're like, oh man, when I found out we had to be on this show for an hour when we first started, I'm like, an hour? Are you kidding me? I don't know. But you know what? Listening to the stories of the guests that we have, and sharing the stories with, each other, Carla and stuff, the hour goes fast. I mean, look, it's almost an hour already, but it's just, I don't know how you did it back then. Hey, you know what? You know who my bestie is, right?
I can see who your best. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I know you're,
So just so you know, back in his day, they used to like write stuff down and put it in the mail and mail it like U.S. Postal Service.
Yeah, I remember. I never played because I thought it was ridiculous back then. And I'll tell you this story too, because I think it's amazing where the starting has led. I was a Cincinnati Bengal fan back in the day. Okay, so I went from Cincinnati. I was probably a Bengal fan for 25 years, and then I switched to the Texans, and then I decided to, like I told you that part of the story already. Well, the Bengals, as you know, Wendi, sucked from basically the time that we hurt Bo Jackson to the time that Carson Palmer came. So that was about 15, 16 years. Well, as a Bengal fan in Kansas back then, I had no way to watch the Bengals unless I went to the local bar that had DirecTV to watch the Bengals, right? And so I would get in there, and they were usually, mind you, this is Central Time Zone, so noon start. So I would get in there at noon. I'd watch the Bengals, usually lose, and then people would come in. The late afternoon crowd would flock in around 3:00, and the first thing people would get in the door, how did McNabb do? How did Donovan McNabb do? How did this guy do? And I can remember just turning my head and thinking, you morons, this isn't about individuals. This is about teams. Why are we talking about individuals? Why is your first question about McNabb? Shouldn't it be about? So after that season ended, I can remember being in my apartment probably January, February of the following year. I'm like, okay, I'm getting tired of being a poor college student. I want to make money off this my sports knowledge. There should be a way to turn my knowledge into money, right? And lo and behold, I settled on fantasy football as my outlet for turning that knowledge into money. And which, 2 years after, I basically completely dismissed the possibility of playing fantasy football. I was playing it and making money doing it. So
that's crazy.
Wow. I think you're doing pretty good at it. I don't know.
Yeah, I found a niche. There have been a lot of things I've been behind the curve on, and I take pride in identifying trends before they become trends. But there's a lot of things. I was behind the curve on getting a computer, for example. I've told Carla this story a handful of times. I can remember saying in the mid to late 90s, I'm not getting a computer. That's ridiculous. What am I going to do with that? I'm going to buy a brother word processor. So that's going to get me where I need to go. And I was probably good 2 or 3 years behind the curve on computers. If I'd been thinking, I would have invested what money I had into that small thing called Apple. But
yes,
I didn't think computers were going to last. But I know I was well ahead of the curve on fantasy football, because I know there were people like Bob Barrows, please get better.
Yes.
But people were like that were doing it in the early to mid 90s, and probably even a little bit before that. But I can remember going through the sports magazines when I was young and getting specs that insert on Sports Illustrated or Sport Magazine or Sporting News, and like fantasy football. And then the thing I wasn't going to do was, we grew up poor enough that I wasn't going to just pay 25 cents to put a stamp on something and hope that I was going to make money doing it. That's to say I had humble beginnings, I think would be an understatement. So I learned pretty early the value of a dollar or a penny, whatever. So, anyway, so there was no way I was going to pay money to do something like that, send it in the mail, put another 25 cents stamp on it, and then hope I was going to win money as a result of, and maybe they'd get it in time, maybe they wouldn't. That was the thing that bothered me the most, is I might do this, and wherever I was sending it to may not get it by second.
Yeah, you had to have some dedicated people to do that, or else it was not going to work. I wasn't around playing that. No. We did a live draft at my house before and stuff like that, but other than that, yeah. So, anyways, Doug, can you tell everybody where can they find you? Where can they see your work? All of that good stuff.
Yep, the bulk of what I do, pretty much 98% of what I do is on FF Today right now. With it being postseason, I'm doing a called Road to the Super Bowl. It hits on Thursday morning or afternoon, depends on when my boss gets around to posting it, but it's usually Thursday morning or Thursday afternoon. And right now, with the playoffs in motion, I'm focusing more on the DFS angle, like we talked about earlier. But most of my stuff, like I said, 98% of my stuff is on FF Today, and then you can always reach out to me DM or otherwise on the X or Twitter, and that's where I am right now. I do some content, some I'll call it low level content for a Indian company called Sportskeeda. That's coming to an end here in a few weeks, but the bulk of what I do and the bulk of the preseason matchup analysis and the stuff that I really dig deep into is all with FF Today.
Awesome. Well, and I have to tell you something, Carla. I'm so glad that you were able to talk Doug into coming on tonight. So thank you again, Doug, our number one and only backup. But hey, we love you. We love you.
Yeah,
but hey, Carla, I have to give a shout out. We actually have an international fan. Okay, we have a new subscriber, international. This guy lives in London, okay? And so his name is Vikrant, okay? And I probably butchered that because I can't remember how I was supposed to say it, but he loves our show. Want to give him a shout out. I'm sure he's sleeping. It's the middle of the night there, but he said he was going to watch it. So we want to say hi to him. So, Carla,
guys,
yep, thank you.
Guys, explain to me who this Greg Kellog is. He said great show. I think you might want to check back with him.
The name sounds so familiar. You know what? You got to give all kinds of love to Greg, because Greg is the one that put Carla and I as a team. And
yes,
not only did he pick the right teammate for me, he picked the sister for me. So
yes,
I appreciate that.
Carla,
he knows what he's doing. I don't know. So Carla, why don't you tell everybody about next week? What we got going on there, girl?
Thank you, viewers, for being loyal to this show and spending this hour with us. Let me just see, from a radio announcer point of view, you guys are pretty solid. Thank you so much, Carly. Thank you. We really appreciate that. Thank you. Just call me talent.
GK.
Talent Scout. Thank you, Greg. We love you. So thank you so much for spending this hour with us. Doug, can you please remind everyone how they can find you on Twitter? What's your Twitter handle, please?
Just what you see on the screen here. If you can't see it on the screen, at DOUGORTH. If you have trouble remembering the last name, it's the direction north without the end. So DOUG.
An all-around good guy. Just look up all-around good guy, and you're going to see a little picture of Greg Orth.
and he's mine. Ooh. Oh,
okay, babe.
Okay.
Carly, thank you. You and Carolyn, I love you guys. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you again to the Sports Affiliation for giving us such a wonderful platform to speak our truth and be real in what we offer and do. JC, we cannot thank you enough for making our life easy. The man behind it all, we love you so much. Join us next Tuesday, January 23rd at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time with two beautiful and powerful women in the community, Renee and Gemma. You don't want to miss this episode.
Don't do
These
it.
two have so much in store for us. Good night, everyone. Stay healthy. Snow is really knocking our doors. And we cannot wait to see you next week for a new episode of The Game Changer. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again, Doug.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.